I'm Bob Verkeil, Superintendent of the Central New York Division, and today we're in Star Lake, New York, visiting the Western Adirondack Model Railroaders. This is a group of just 4 guys. They've been together about 6 years, and they're building a model railroad to depict an early 20th century line from Wanakena on Cranberry Lake to the Benson Mines. Come join us on a tour.
My name is Ted Tate. I'm a member of the Western Adirondack Railroad Modelers. Ed over here is another one of our members. Paul in the background is another, and our 4th member, Bob, is away this weekend, so can't be here to share in this. But about 7 years ago, Bob said to a bunch of us sitting around in the basement of the church, "I've got an idea for a layout, railroad layout that will tell some of the history of our area. And what you're going to see today is what we've come up with some buildings from the period, some of the layout of the track itself, and we will show you what we've got." In 1902, Rich Lumber Company built a railroad that they called the Cranberry Lake Railroad from Benson Mines, which is represented over on the far end of our layout, into Wanakena, which is right here, about 6 miles of railroad. They had some things to conquer to get there, one of which was a big swamp to cross, and there's a trestle in the background that we'll show you more of later. They went in, and Rich had partners who were people who made things out of the lumber that Rich cut, and they worked together in Pennsylvania at 2 different sites, and then they came to Wanakena. They disassembled the whole village in Pennsylvania and put the lumber on flat cars and built houses in Wanakena to house the 1,500 people who came to work in the mills and in cutting the trees and getting them brought into the mill pond and the mill area. They were here until 1912, by which point they had cut everything, clear cut, all the way to the county line. The thing that I know about it is that in 1916, there was nothing taller than a 4-year-old in this area, because my mother was playing on the property that we have here, and there was nothing taller than she was, and nothing all the way to the county line. They made all kinds of things. We'll show you some of the mills a little bit later. But they took up the tracks in 1912 and went on to Vermont and did the same kind of lumbering there. This is beautiful downtown Wanakena in about 1907. This is the Rich and Andrews General Store that provided food, clothing, and all of the other necessities for the 1,500 people who lived in Wanakena, doing the lumbering and working in the factories around the mill pond. This is the church that was moved here in 1902 from Pennsylvania and built, and it's still standing. It's one of the few buildings represented on here that is still standing, and this is built from the actual church itself rather than photographs. Rich didn't want his workers to have to cross the railroad bridge to get to work at the mills, so he built the footbridge, which has been a feature of Wanakena ever since and still is. It was built in 1902. They left in 1912. The footbridge stayed, and so did the rest of the town, and there's a story behind that too. But in 20 2014, we had an ice jam that knocked down this tower, so the footbridge had to be replaced, which we did by 2016, raised the money and rebuilt it, and it's there to be enjoyed again today. It's part of my history as a little boy, walking up the road and across the footbridge and going in to buy penny candy in the general store. The Helen was a steam launch that went from Wanakena out onto the rest of Cranberry Lake. There was no public transport any place but Wanakena. This was the first public transport at Cranberry Lake at all. And so, but people already had built camps and hotels, and the steam tug, Helen, would take people out to the camps and take mail and groceries. That tradition of a boat traveling the length of the lake delivering mail continued into my lifetime. This is the veneer mill. All of the mills other than the lumber and lath and chip mill used the hardwoods that were here. They made veneer in this mill. They made shoe lasts in this mill, the form that shoemakers used to build a shoe on and actually pound nails into the heels and all that stuff. They made buggy whip handles, which are in great demand in 2020. And they made barrel heads. This was called a heading mill. They made the barrel heads for barrels that were made elsewhere. And across the mill pond is the lumber mill, lath mill, and chip mill that provided a lot of the lumber to rebuild parts of New York City after a fire. This is actually 3 mills in one of the 7 around the mill pond. In this mill they made lumber, and one of these loading docks was a half-mile long. What was left for making lumber, they made lath, for lath and plaster walls. What was left from that, they chipped up into wood chips to fire the boilers of all the mills all around the mill pond. On this part of our setup, we have the car house and the engine house. These were, again, built from photographs, and the structure inside this building is just beautifully done. I want to pick it up and show you just how finely crafted that is. It's all post and beam construction, just like the original. And our master modeler, Bob Meredith, is the one who has done both of these buildings. The railroad bridge was built, of course, as soon as they were building the rest of the railroad. This is the Oswegatchie River running into Cranberry Lake right there at Wanakena, just upstream from the footbridge. This bridge became an automobile bridge. When they took up the tracks, it stayed, and I don't know what of the original structure was there when I first came in 1940, but I remember driving across a plank road bridge, and it would clatterty, 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 clatterty. That was replaced by a steel deck bridge, and that just this year is being replaced by a concrete deck bridge. But they're all right in that same place, right where the railroad bridge was, right where Rich put it, because it was the best way to get across the Oswegatchie and get over to the mill pond. Hopping rocks in the rapids here was one of the favorite activities of kids when I was a kid, and it still is. People are still doing it above and below the bridge in the rapids. The Barnhart loader was a marvelous contraption. It would go out on the next to last car on the train and load the last car, then winch itself to the next car and load the car that it had just been sitting on, so that they could get the logs up from the jackworks and get them into the mill. Bob Meredith did some kit bashing and built this from photographs. Virtually everything we have on here was made from photographs. One building is still existent, and so we made that from the actual building itself, the church over in the village, but everything else was from photographs. Between Benson Mines and Wanakena, they encountered 400 feet of swamp and gully that needed to be crossed, and so they built a trestle, which was the best way to get there. Trestles are nasty beasts which can catch on fire, and they rot and they need repair. So as they were bringing train loads of supplies in for the people in Wanakena, they would hook in bottom dump hopper cars, and as they crossed the trestle, they would dump it, and they eventually filled in the whole thing, and it's called the Big Fill Trestle. And if the forest weren't closed because of COVID, I could walk you right on that fill today. This is the settlement of Benson Mines. The homes that are represented here are not necessarily representing actual buildings there. The mine buildings themselves are. This was an iron ore mine, open pit, and the Benson family ran it for a number of years. We've got crusher house and further processing building here. These are done from photographs. And when we get around the other side, I can show you some of the operations of the mine itself. In 1942, the whole town was picked up and moved into Star Lake itself, and I happen to own one of those houses right now. I was telling a story about my grandfather riding his horse from Wanakena to Benson Mines, well, actually to Newton Falls, to have a service in the afternoon there. And before he could get home, it was dark and very cold, being January, and he stopped overnight with the Bensons. And so it's possible that my grandfather stayed overnight in the house that I now own. Who knows? Doesn't matter. Good story anyway. These are the ore processing buildings at Benson Mines. Back here is one of the crushers, and the other crusher to crush it to fine. Further processing where they separated the ore from the tailings, and the tailings pile here. We have a chute that is going to be from the building to the tailings pile, but we don't have that added to it yet. Work in progress, as every layout is. Over that direction, we have the representation of the mine where they're blasting. They've just blasted off the hill here, and the loader is ready to load railroad cars with the ore, which would then be pushed up to here to the first crusher. It would be dumped and then crushed and sent on to the rest of the processing.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed your tour, and if you ever find yourself in Star Lake, New York, the Western Adirondack Model Railroaders would love to have you visit their little operation.